Hi, family and friends. I just wanted to take a moment to thank you for maybe just spending a moment to look at a life, to pause for a second to say, we remember. For some of you, well, maybe you've come into Kathy's story, maybe in the last few pages. For some of you, you've been there, well, from the very beginning. Some of you, well, you may have known her for decades. But for spending the time, thank you. And speaking of time, I need you to go back in time for a moment to a slightly different world, to a slightly different place, when her family found out that she's coming into this world. She's about to be born. And if you look at that moment in time, here in the United States, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house with a white picket fence and a 2-car garage will cost you $9,300. And you could buy that house out of the Sears and Roebuck catalog. Those were different days. Your wage for the entire year is $3,200. Can you imagine her parents realizing a child is on the way and they have to make $3,200 last 365 days? Brand new car will cost you $1,500, and it's probably got lots of chrome and probably fins on it, and gas has soared to 19 cents a gallon. You're going back far enough in time that if you were out in Nevada, you would be hearing about the nuclear testing going on at the testing range out there. There are folks that are still dealing with post-polio syndrome. In fact, it's kind of epidemic, watching people have to deal with what was one of the worst illnesses, polio. In fact, when she's born, there is thankfulness that it's finally coming to an end. I need you to pause for a moment to see a world that really was different. If you were in New York, you might be able to see for the first time a color television set, because every single one up to this point is black and white. This is the year that I Love Lucy will debut on television. And if you needed to steal away to a movie, you could go watch The Day the Earth Stood Still for the first time. Or maybe Disney's new Alice in Wonderland. Harry S. Truman is in the White House. You've gone back to 1951? That's 72 years ago. Isn't it amazing how even 7 decades can fly by? But I'm thankful today. I'm thankful that she came into this world, that she survived, because you, her children, if you're watching at this moment, you would not exist had she not come into the world. She had a purpose. And I know at times when you tell somebody's story, it can be the best of times and the worst of times and everything in between. But there are children, 4 of you, and one adopted, a chosen child, that her fingerprints are all over your heart. If she'd not come into this world, some of you would not exist. Some of you would not have the life you have, or the spouse you have, or the children you have. Because she's existed, there are grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And there are people that are going to be able to look back at Ancestry.com and say, because she existed, I'm here. She was a woman who enjoyed being pampered, being cared for. And thank goodness, Charles, Rick, came into her world because he would love her and do his best to be a provider. Just like when children come, she would do her best, the best she knew how, to be a mom. And she seemed to function best when people needed her, wanted her. I think I could understand why, after the kids are all grown up, that she could see a need, a want, a desire to care for children again, adopting a child. You can see her time being a caregiver and a babysitter, taking care of other people's kids. And if she couldn't care for the children, maybe the work of her hands would just be being a seamstress, knowing that she's basically holding it all together for some. It's difficult at times as we get older, as life changes. And she certainly did have times that were wonderful. And there were times that were difficult. You imagine living in Alaska, living in Anchorage, and your husband working on the pipeline, flying out, and for just a while you have to be a single mom, and she's trying to figure it all out. And here you kids are, all grown up. It's amazing how the time has flown. Family and friends have come and gone over the years. Some have gone on and are standing on the other side with her. Others have moved on in life, just as you have moved on to different places in the world, in the country, and you've created a world. But you have that world because she existed. And some of the things that you'll have is because you've had the best of times, and some of the things you'll have is because when the road got bumpy, you made different decisions. And it gave you a whole new life. But today there's peace. As she stands by the side of God, there's no illness, there's no dementia. There's nothing to pull at her and pull her away. And I know that when her husband passed, my goodness, that 45 plus years together, it had to be one of the worst of moments. I can imagine her heart would only try to seek some level of companionship when you've had a loss of somebody that's been there 40 plus years. This is a woman who enjoyed being pampered. She loved some of the simplest things, which sometimes got complicated, like the shopping. My goodness, if we could take QVC off of the channel, life would have been a little better. But there was just something about it. It was simple things, simpler days. And you've been there, and I know you've loved her through it. And sometimes it was easy, and sometimes it wasn't. Her trying to find her way through the world, and probably at times maybe even illness creeping in there that was just unknown. But today she is at rest and there's peace. And some of you realize that some of the times of her existence, she was terribly vulnerable. And you know what we do? The best that we can. And I know you did. And today she is not forgotten. And as folks gather to lay that body to rest, the mind is at rest too, and the soul rejoices. She was not alone today, not at all. In fact, you're joining in at this moment, at this very moment, as we celebrate her and remember her. And there are folks gathered here that have heard her story. A story of a woman finding her way in the world, coming into the world at, well, one of the most up times in our country, the 1950s. Her time in Alaska, her time raising children, her time. I know that you've been there, and you have memories, and it may be gathered around a kitchen table in early days. It may be her enjoying a glass of wine with you, boxed wine at that, but nonetheless wine. Maybe it's a moment that you'll remember that is positive and bright. You know, I have pictures on my phone that are things that other people have taken, things I've taken, and the photos I don't like, you know what I do? I delete them. So maybe if you are remembering Mom today, if you're remembering Kathy today, if there are some photos that you cherish that are memories with her, hold on to them. And if you have any that are not as flattering as you would like, delete them. Because today the story begins to wrap up. Because that life of 72 years begins to come to a close. And there's peace, and there's quiet. And she understood what it was to have the best of times and the worst of times herself. Certainly with Rick, you know, all of those kids that made it through polio, he was one of the ones that would later on suffer with post-polio syndrome. He would also have his bout with cancer. She knew what it was to see struggle, to see loss. And she would find her way through, sometimes making the best decisions, and sometimes there were decisions I think a few people would probably want her to make differently. But she would find her way through to her last day, to her moment, where she would head out of this world. I hope you find your way through. I hope you find healing and rejoice in the fact that she existed and had a purpose to come into this world. She would do her best to raise her children. And because of it, there are children that live, and grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and countless generations to come. And I'm thankful for those moments. You know, it was Robert Frost, the poet, who once wrote that nature's first green is gold. It's her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf is a flower, but only so for about an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, Just like Eden sank to grief, so dawn goes down to day. Nothing gold can stay. It was Frost's way of saying that if something is beautiful and vibrant, it's probably only going to be there for a moment. And whether it's the days of her youth or the best of her days, well, they're only there for a moment. If anything is precious, it's only going to be here for just a glimpse, like a flower or a sunset. But now, as dawn has come, as the flower has wilted, it reblooms in heaven, and she stands by the side of God. So I will leave you exactly where I will leave graveside, and that is with the 23rd Psalm. Some 17 times in this writing, David, the writer, uses a personal word like me, my, or mine. Listen to what he wrote. The Lord is my shepherd, and I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the quiet waters, and he restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake, and even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you're with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all of the days of my life. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I'm so thankful that she came into this world, that she gave some of you life and the best she knew how to give. But now, as the body is at rest, the soul rejoices, and she stands by the one who wrote this song. She stands by the side of the one who made her, who gave you life, God himself, until you join on that day a long time from now in a blessed reunion where all is made right. Thank you for letting me spend time with her today to celebrate her and to lay the body to rest. May God bless you, hold you, and keep you all of your days.